Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer, and today's recap of episode 8 of Mobile Suit Gundam: The Witch from Mercury comes to you courtesy of business. Just business in general, because that's all this episode's about, is some business. So, as we start out here, we're taking a look at the aerial and kind of all of the Earth House being not super stoked that they got roped into having to do this. Some of them are more stoked than others. But all of them are pretty worried, and Choo Choo here makes her return and is kind of pissed off that she now has to follow the orders of a Spacian turd, as she continues to call her. But that's pretty much all of this initial opening chat, and we get this shot that I've seen floating around Twitter a little bit. And it's like the most intimidating you can be while holding an airbrush towards someone. This paint everywhere. Just Delling Jr., or I guess Girl Boss Delling now, is not great at painting. And Soletta's just as covered in paint, as you'd expect. Then we get the OP. The OP is still good. It still bangs. It hasn't changed or anything. But we get Choo Choo being very upset, as you can see here. She is kind of asking her compatriots here, the other Earth people, Earthens, I guess, how they feel about it. Largely just from like, do we want to follow a Spacian, is kind of the whole thing. And they get into a really philosophical argument later on about this, and we'll talk about it in a moment. But this episode kind of gets like weirdly deep. Not necessarily a bad way, it doesn't feel out of place, but it is like the series continues to ramp up in its Gundamness pretty much every episode. Anyway, so they're like in their groups. You got the business guys, you got the mobile suit teams, then you got like the extra business people, kind of all trying to grapple with this whole thing. Then Girl Boss Delling and Suletta here go to Soletta's mom to be like, hey, what is the Gundam? Tell us more about it. And this is where we get Suletta kind of asking her mom, why did you lie to me? And she's like, it's to protect you. But we all know there's some sus stuff happening. That ain't the only reason. Suletta here is just very naive, and is, her mom is just doing all kinds of dirt. She does have a Char moment in this where she like literally just stands up with her arms spread like Char, which I'm hoping is the thumbnail of this video. Like, it's a very small bit in the episode, but it's just too perfect. It's very self-aware, but Girl Boss Delling here is not really buying into it. She's like, I feel like you're not telling us everything, but we did get the nice moment where Suletta gets to have that resolution with her mom. Which is kind of more sold as like, Suletta's happy about something, it's going to get ruined almost immediately. Anyway, they have their conversation. We see Girl Boss Delling here kind of trying to figure out what she's doing. She has this whole big plan, but she doesn't really know a lot about Gundams, and she keeps kind of going back to that moment when her dad was like, the burden of Gundams is greater than you think it is. And then we get our main man, Shaddiq, here, strolling on up being like, hey girl, let me get them digits, what's good? And like, Shaddiq is just out here trying to make business moves, but also being like, hey, I kind of have a thing for Girl Boss Delling, so let's do it. And Suletta's like freaking out, but they're doing like business stuff here, a lot of business. And you get to see Suletta kind of, this is her come down after Shaddiq's like, I'll marry you, Delling Jr. Girl Boss Delling. And she freaks out, and then Girl Boss Delling's like, shut up, whatever. This is where we get the deep philosophical argument, which is really interesting. Because like Gundam does this in a variety of ways, but this is probably like the most direct because it has to kind of do with the production of mobile suits. Like, you get Anaheim people occasionally in the UC, and you kind of get, like, Morgan Rote and stuff in Gundam Seed, but no one really talks about, like, the whole, should we make mobile suits for war? And that's kind of what this question is like, well, we own the rights to Gundams now, but Gundams can only be used for war. They're very expensive, and Suletta's mom told us we can't mass produce the Ariel. So what do we do, right? Do we make more Faracts? And they look at the price of that, and it's absurd. Do we look to do something else? And they kind of have this infighting because I guess the reason that the Earth is kind of like the second class here is, that they put all this money into making space colonies and stuff, all these resources, and they didn't get a return on investment, but they also got wars. So the Earth is pretty much just like constantly like broke and stuff. Not like even just from a financial sense, but like it's pretty constantly just not in a good shape. And a lot of the Earthens are like war orphans, and Shaddiq even gets a mention that he is an orphan, but I don't know if it's a war orphan or not. But, they kind of contemplate, they're like, well, if another war happens, it's going to be on Earth, so do we want to be complicit in that? And it is kind of an interesting thing, because you don't really get, like, that whole thing. You don't get, like, a Dr. Oppenheimer moment where they're like, this weapon is probably the worst thing to come out of, like, all of our research. And they don't really go that far, but they do kind of make the point. They're like, we don't really want to be complicit, but then they're like, well, we got to make money, and it becomes this whole big question throughout the rest of the episode that different people struggle with. And it is pretty interesting. And everyone kind of ends up getting their roles, but everyone's really kind of floundering until Girl Boss telling Girl Bosses again, and then it takes a minute. But this is a unique conversation to happen for Gundam, and for people who have been really skeptical on whether this show gets mature, and maybe he didn't see past the first couple episodes of like this kind of Yuri romance thing, and they thought it was kind of a cash grab. This is like one of the moments where we see that really not being true. Sure, it still has its lighthearted, goofy moments, but this is a question that doesn't really get asked a lot in Gundam from the like manufacturing standpoint, right? Because like usually pilots are on the other side of it, and they're like, well, do we choose not to pilot? But then they get forced into situations where they like have to protect their friends or whatever. Here it's like, do we even start that process? Do we even put those things out in the world? And it is pretty unique. It's a very interesting question to ask, and not one we get within Gundam a whole lot. And I mean, this takes up like a good 4 or 5 minutes of the show. It's a lot. And that takes us to the break. We get to see Guel being the bullied, and you're like, man, I really hope Guel goes to Earth House sometime soon, because our boy is just getting like clowned on 24/7, 365. He cannot catch a break. He just wants to enjoy his mug of stew. And, I mean, I guess if you want to, classify it, he's either homeless or he's glamping, one of the two, because he does have quite a... Someone either gave him a bunch of stuff when he left, or he had access to this, or he stole it. I don't know. But, he's got a fairly large tent. He's got cooking utensils. He's got boxes of supplies, which maybe the school supplies him, but you would think if they supplied that, they would have just like regular-ass dorms for students. But, Guel is out here just kind of getting clowned on. Shaddiq shows up, and, I'm going to get rid of the subtitles because they're stuck again, unfortunately. But Shaddiq shows up and is like, hey, come to our house. You can have a shower and everything. Which confirms for us that Guel has not showered in a hot minute. But Guel is like, I'm not going to lick the boots of somebody else. I'm going to, figure this out on my own. And, like, this whole episode, really starting in the last episode where Shaddiq is, like, rocking up on Nika like, hey, girl, well, good. We get to see him really start to fall into this role, or I guess, like, step up into this role of being, like, the antagonist to everybody, right? But not like it's a very sharp way. He's very charismatic, and he doesn't feel like the bad guy. He's got his own ideals that he's pushing for that we find out in this episode, but, he is intellectually the, competitor to Girl Boss Delling. He is most likely going to be a comparable pilot to that of Suletta in the aerial. And we get to see some kind of like foreshadowing of that. But like every interaction he has had in these last 2 episodes have been really like, he is out for himself. He is not out for his dad necessarily. He's almost probably not even out for his business to a full extent. But he is out here like, Gundams are the future. We can't get rid of them, but I need to control them. And it's a very unique, I want to keep saying unique, but Shaddiq is a very good bad guy in that he doesn't feel comical. He makes a lot of sense. And, you know, from what we've learned of Gundams in the series, it's pretty spot on. He's like, there's a lot of potential here. I don't necessarily fear this technology, but I want to be the one in control of it because I don't want it to, you know, come at me necessarily. So he's doing all his maneuvers. He's not Guel. He's not rushing in to do a duel. He's not being manipulated necessarily by anyone to force himself into a duel with the aerial. It's going to be on his own terms, and it's going to be really interesting. And here we get to see Girl Boss Delling talk to this lady from Pale. And, you know, this is the lady from Vanadis that I don't remember if we even saw her in the prologue. I don't know if there's a consensus on that yet, but she worked there, and she kind of, it's not shown on screen, but it's alluded to that she tells Girl Boss Delling and gives her all the necessary information to be like, hey, listen, yeah, the whole Orcs Earth thing, making Gundams wasn't what the Gund format, the permit score stuff was initially designed for. It was medical technology. And that is kind of where we see Girl Boss Delling come back into this. And like, okay, I've kind of figured it out. And we get to, no. We see Shaddiq kind of come at her. And once again, not in an aggressive way. He's very charismatic about it. But he's like, hey, listen, this is a win-win. I give you financial backing to get up on your feet. And you give me the Gundam, basically. And we don't really get a conclusion to that. She doesn't say yes or no. But it is kind of very heavily implied that she's like, get out of here, Shaddiq. I'm not messing with you right now. And this is where we get him being very sly about, if you don't join me, you're gonna join me regardless. Like, you get your choice, and if you make the wrong choice, I'm gonna force you into the other choice, basically. And then we get Girl Boss Delling kind of rocking up to everybody infighting, and she's like, we can make weapons, sure. Or we could do this medical stuff, and we get to see the professor lady, whose name I don't remember, show back up and explain what this was. And this really hits for like a lot of the Earth people, because I guess this technology just was fully abandoned. Like, nobody else in the Benerit Group decided to follow this. This is not a medical technology that's very consistent, which I think is why so many people were surprised when Lady Prospera popped her arm off in that hearing. They're like, what is going on? We've never seen anything like this. Because the Vanadis Institute was crushed and buried, and that technology just doesn't exist. So they're kind of like, okay, well, we can develop this medical technology through mobile suits, which is a little confusing. I mean, I kind of get how it works. Like, you're kind of reverse engineering in a way. But, like, it feels a little bit of a stretch. And this is kind of what they end up going for. It's very hopeful. They have this cute little horribly edited promotional video that I just love to death. Like, all of the quirky editing things, you know that, like, the editors, I guess, like, the animators as well, but, like, there was some editors in on this conversation, because, like, look at this very terrible job of, like, cropping out the aerial Gundam here. Look at this green screen mess. I love it so much. And, like, there's stutters and everything as far as, like, where Suletta's positioned. The goat walks by in a minute. Yeah, you see the goat right there. They do this little number, and, like, after it, we cut to Lady Prospera just laughing about it. And this lady kind of being like, oh, that's good. They're not, like, gonna fall down the hole of being terrible people. And everyone's kind of, like, on the same page. They're like, great, we're, you know, gonna launch with this big party. It's gonna be great. We're gonna make medical technology, and then we get Girl Boss Delling here getting updated rules for starting a student startup. That House Shaddiq here, we get introduced to his homies here, have changed the rules which makes no sense as to why this wasn't a rule already, but like you have to prove the safety of the product your student startup is developing. And they're like, they can't prove the safety of Gundam, even though they super can, because like Suletta has piloted the Gundam with no problem. Girl Boss Delling has piloted Ariel with no problem. But I guess maybe if they challenge him on the Faract or something, it's a little different. But like, this is his kind of checkmate intellectually. This is like putting Girl Boss Delling in the corner and saying, okay, what are you going to do now? But yeah, we get this lady, a bunch of people are simping for her because she's got a cape and she looks very serious. We get this one who is, I guess, kind of going to be like the new bubbly kind of person. We do see a little bit of her, but there's another character I feel like that exists in the show already that's like this, and I just don't remember her name, but she exists. Then we get like this one being sad for Delling Jr. This one's like, well, we'll cheer Delling Jr. up. They also don't get named in this, which is why I'm saying this one and this one, because they're not named in this scene, which makes sense because it'd be very uncomfortable to be like, you and you and you and you. But we do get the vibe that they're all female. They're all Shaddiq's like top crew. This feels like a weird wife situation. I'm assuming that's not what the case is, but it feels very strange. And then we get to the Michaelis here, which is going to be Shaddiq's mobile suit. I assume his dad talks to him about it, and I'm pretty sure this is the one he's going to pilot, because he's inevitably going to have to duel the Ariel. But yeah, it's a really good episode. This show continually gets better, and for people out there concerned it's not Gundam enough, these last few episodes have really like knocked it out of the park in terms of, oh, we're getting to that serious, like, kind of mature, this is very gray area, ethically speaking, kind of Gundam stuff, and it's gold. I love it. This is just, yeah, this is a good episode. The previous episodes have been really good, but this slaps. Anyway, those have been my thoughts, my recap of this episode. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought, if you enjoyed it. If you've not been enjoying the series, let me know how far you've gotten and what you're not enjoying about it. And as always, friends, do your best to stay safe and keep on building.